phone hills, but it never does. That's because you at war with love.
Malcolm Turnbull may have arrived later than expected, but the welcome was no less effusive from Benjamin Netanyahu.
It was a welcome distraction for the leaders, who are both mired in domestic drama.
Malcolm, you're a true friend of Israel. And the fact that you came all the way from Australia, it's a long schlep, I can tell you. It's a long trip.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Bibi, Sarah, Lucy and I are so pleased to be here. So honoured to be here.
I think our two nations understand one another in the deepest sense.
Stronger and stronger grow our ties.
Mr. Prime Minister, please.
I think we should
just get there. Just
right away.
I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
I can say to you that we are so pleased that you are here.
This special certificate honouring this moment of your visit to Israel.
Okay.
You, Malcolm Turnbull, His Excellency, and Lucy.
Yeah. Of course, tomorrow we will see the reenactment of the charge of the Australian Light Horse at Beersheba.
We're here assembled because we are honouring an extraordinary battle, an extraordinary campaign, which made history, which fulfilled history. A tale of incredible courage.
Thank you, Anzac soldiers.
The tradition of man and horse is part of us. Bill the Bastard, that was a horse. That was a horse, I hasten to add. He was unrideable.
Malcolm Turnbull is also conscious of just how fraught sovereignty and politics in this region can be. He'll also meet with the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority. Bill Shorten visited Palestinian territory today.
So we're in Parliament in Australia, and we're the opposition.
We attack those who seek to attack us. And those who contemplate that, I strongly advise you, do not test the will of the State of Israel or the Army of Israel.
The path to peace ultimately relies upon a two-state solution.
That's to say, 2 states for 2 peoples. Obviously, agreement has to be reached and the boundary line has to be agreed.
I think there's genuine frustration at the lack of progress towards a two-state solution.
These are values we have always fought for and always will. Thank you so much for your very warm welcome.
So he would have been preoccupied through a lot of that, but to his credit, he did front up, Mark, right off the top with the Israeli Prime Minister and say that on the Iran nuclear deal, we're with Europe and against you and the United States.
Yeah, I thought that was a very significant thing, and I agree. It was to his great credit that he did that. Julie Bishop had made a similar point earlier, just before the Prime Minister left, and the Prime Minister arrived in Israel, went to Jerusalem, stood there next to Bibi Netanyahu and actually made the same point, that Australia does believe that the United States and the other parties to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the agreement with Iran, should hold to that agreement, and that it has implications for the discussions that are currently, or the hopes that there could be discussions and some sort of peaceful resolution to the situation happening now with North Korea, because North Korea would look at this process and say, well, why would we bother getting into discussions? Why would we bother reaching any sort of agreement to have sanctions lifted if, in fact, the parties to such an agreement, if we agree to give up our nuclear program or to curtail it or whatever, why would we do that if, after the fact, the US just simply pulls out? And that's what Trump's been sort of angling towards. And I think it was quite significant that Turnbull had the courage and the purpose to say that very strongly in Israel, sending a message both to Jerusalem but also to Washington.
Well, I don't think North Korea really cares much about what happens in this instance. They're not going to do anything at any rate. But
so you don't think he should have said anything?
Well, I agree with the position of
Donald Trump and the Israeli government.
No, but the question here is, we're discussing the merits of, not your view, but the merits of Malcolm Turnbull saying right up front, this is Australia's position.
What it demonstrates is that Australia has independent positions from the United States, because this continues the policy that Julie Bishop's been talking about. She was very close to John Kerry in the Obama administration, and it also shows that Australia can have a different position to Netanyahu's government in Israel. So what Malcolm Turnbull is doing is following the tradition of successive
he's telling the Americans they should stick to a deal that they signed.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with him saying
He's not
that.
separating from the US. He's telling Trump not to separate, not to welch on the deal.
Well, he's got a different policy from the US President, and he's the Australian Prime Minister.
Yep. Well, the US President's got a different policy from the official
We don't want to get bogged down on this issue in any case.
We've
got a lot to talk about this morning, but just before we do leave this issue, have a look at, again, the footage of the reenactment. You would think would be historically correct, wouldn't you? What's wrong with that picture? There's an Israeli flag there. There's also an Australian and New Zealand flag. That was 1917. Israel did not exist.
It wasn't even Israel, it was Palestine. And they weren't invited. The Palestinians weren't invited to that reenactment either.
Palestine didn't exist in 1917. It was part of the Ottoman... That was the Ottoman Empire territory.
It was.
Beersheba was part of the Ottoman...
It wasn't Israel.
It wasn't Israel, and it wasn't Palestine.
It was part of the liberation of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire.
So I just thought it was a bit odd that the flag was there, that's all, if it was going to be an accurate reenactment.
But it's nitpicking. I mean, we were on Israeli soil, and that part of Israel is inside the Green Line. So that part of Israel goes back to...
It is now.
No, it has been since 1948, since the United Nations established the State of Israel.
Not in 1917.
No, but Palestine didn't exist in 1917, nor did Israel. And someone's put up a flag
and there's no Palestinian
of
flag
a country there in the presence of it. They're visiting. I don't really think it's a big point.
All right, now, this question to Malcolm Turnbull on the trip from Phil Williams, I think, is a good segue to our next topic.